The golden light of sunset spilled across Oak Ridge's weathered streets as Liam Carter wiped grease-stained hands on his faded blue coveralls. His reflection caught in the grimy window of Wilson's auto shop. Tired eyes, unshaven face, but still, that stubborn glimmer of hope that refused to dim despite everything life had thrown his way. In this forgotten corner of the world, where rust claimed vehicles as surely as time claimed dreams, Liam worked miracles with metal and determination. Each turn of his wrench wasn't just fixing an engine, it was keeping his own world from falling apart. The stack of unpaid bills in his pocket weighed heavier than any toolbox he'd ever carried. Just one more day, he whispered to himself. The same promise he'd made yesterday, and the day before that. Miles away, on the winding road that cut through the shadowed pines, a sleek white Mercedes purred along the asphalt, a gleaming beacon of luxury against the humble landscape. Behind the wheel, Sophia Monroe gripped the leather-bound steering wheel, her manicured fingers adorned with a single platinum ring. Her silk blouse and tailored blazer spoke of boardrooms and penthouse views, a stark contrast to the rural simplicity surrounding her. The first sputter of the engine came without warning. The second brought a frown to her porcelain features. By the third, the magnificent machine that had never failed her before glided helplessly to the roadside, steam rising from beneath its immaculate hood like ghostly surrender. Twilight was deepening, painting the empty road in hues of indigo and uncertainty. Sophia's phone displayed the dreaded words, "No service." The dense canopy of trees and the remote location had severed her connection to the world she controlled with such precision. As darkness enveloped the countryside, a pair of headlights appeared in the distance, growing brighter against the encroaching night. The battered pickup truck slowed, its engine grumbling like a reluctant guardian. Liam stepped out, his work-worn boots crunching on gravel. Their eyes met, his reflecting genuine concern, hers a mixture of relief and wariness. Neither could possibly know that this chance encounter on a deserted road would become the first brushstroke in a masterpiece of fate neither had dared to imagine. The first light of dawn painted Wilson's auto shop in hues of amber and promise as Liam's old tow truck rumbled into the gravel lot, the gleaming Mercedes trailing behind like royalty escorted by a humble servant. The juxtaposition wasn't lost on Sophia Monroe, whose elegant poise seemed oddly out of place among the scattered parts and weathered tools that told stories of mechanical resurrection. "I can have it diagnosed by noon," Liam said, his voice carrying the gentle rasp of someone who'd explained mechanical failures too many times to count. His hands, mapped with calluses and minor scars, badges of a lifetime of honest work, moved with surprising grace as he popped the hood of her luxury vehicle. Sophia reached for her designer purse, the leather so soft it seemed to whisper of exclusive boutiques and privileged access. "What's your hourly rate?" she asked, her voice carrying the crisp efficiency of someone accustomed to transactions rather than connections. A small smile tugged at the corner of Liam's lips as he glanced up from the immaculate engine bay. Something flickered in his eyes, not calculation or opportunity, but something Sophia hadn't encountered in boardrooms or charity galas: genuine compassion. "No charge," he said simply, returning to his inspection as if he hadn't just defied every principle of business survival. "I don't understand," Sophia replied, her perfectly arched eyebrows drawing together in confusion. In her world, nothing came without expectation of return. Every kindness had hidden clauses, every generosity its price. Liam straightened, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better days. "Some things matter more than money," he said, his gaze drifting momentarily to a faded photograph tucked beside an ancient cash register, a younger Liam embracing an elderly man with the same kind eyes. My father taught me that. The simplicity of his statement left Sophia speechless. In the Cathedral of Commerce she navigated daily, such sentiments were considered naive at best, liabilities at worst. Yet here, in this humble garage where wealth was measured in integrity rather than assets, she felt something crack within her carefully constructed facade. As morning light streamed through dusty windows, illuminating dancing particles in golden beams, Sophia Monroe, whose signature authorized millions in transactions daily, stood humbled by a generosity that asked for nothing in return. Morning sunlight streamed through the cracked windows of Wilson's auto shop, catching dust motes that danced like memories of better days. Sophia watched Liam work, his movements precise despite the ancient tools that threatened to surrender with each use. A stubborn wrench refused to turn until Liam coaxed it with a gentle whisper and firm hand. A metaphor, perhaps, for his approach to life's unyielding challenges. The shop itself was a tapestry of determination and desperation. Water stains mapped constellations across the ceiling while a persistent drip kept rhythm like a melancholy metronome. In the corner, unopened envelopes stamped with bold red final notice warnings sat in silent accusation. Yet somehow, amid this symphony of struggle, Liam moved with the quiet dignity of a craftsman devoted to his art. Handed down from my grandfather, Liam explained, noticing Sophia's gaze on the vintage toolbox. Not much to look at anymore, but they've fixed more cars than I can count. His smile carried no bitterness, only a weathered hope that refused to dim despite circumstance. Sophia nodded, her manicured fingernails absently tracing the contours of a faded photograph hanging crooked on the wall. Classic cars lined up at what appeared to be a restoration show, with a younger Liam standing proudly beside a gleaming vintage Mustang. "You restored that?" she asked, genuine admiration coloring her voice. "Every bolt, every panel," he confirmed, a spark igniting in his eyes. The kind that money couldn't buy and hardship couldn't extinguish. Took 3 years of nights and weekends, but she purred like nothing you've ever heard. In that moment, watching passion transcend poverty, Sophia felt the weight of her unspoken truth. The woman before him wasn't just any stranded traveler, but Sophia Monroe, CEO of Monroe Automotive Industries, whose signature adorned contracts worth millions and whose decisions influenced automotive design across continents. Yet here, in this humble garage where excellence persisted despite scarcity, she found herself reluctant to bridge their worlds. For once, she wasn't being helped because of her name or fortune. The kindness offered came without agenda or expectation, a currency she'd forgotten existed. As Liam turned back to her Mercedes, whistling softly while his practiced hands coaxed life back into its mechanical heart, Sophia made a silent decision. Some truths could wait. Some moments deserved to exist untainted by the complications of reality, like this one, suspended between two worlds that were never meant to collide, yet somehow had. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Wilson's auto shop when the purr of a familiar engine drew Liam's attention from beneath a rusted Ford. The Mercedes, now restored to its pristine condition, glided into the lot like a pearl against gravel, its elegant lines seemingly out of place, yet somehow belonging in this humble sanctuary of mechanical healing. Sophia emerged, transformed from yesterday's stranded traveler to a vision of composed confidence. Her tailored blazer and silk scarf caught the golden light as she approached, holding a leather portfolio that whispered of boardrooms and decisions that moved mountains. "I have a proposition," she said, her voice carrying the gentle authority of someone accustomed to reshaping realities with words alone. "My family maintains a collection of automobiles, classics, exotics, vehicles that deserve a craftsman's touch rather than merely a mechanic's hands." Liam wiped grease from his palms, the contrast between his calloused fingers and her immaculate appearance stark, yet somehow complimentary. "I'm listening," he replied, caution tempering curiosity in his weathered eyes. "Twice the salary you could make here, a workshop with tools that don't fight you with every turn, healthcare, security." Each word fell between them like stepping stones across an impossible chasm. All for doing what you love, just with machines worthy of your talent. The quiet that followed wasn't contemplation but resistance, a silent rebellion against the gravity of necessity. "I appreciate the offer," Liam finally said, his gaze drifting across the shop's familiar imperfections. "But this place, this town, it's home. The people here count on me." Just then, as if summoned by cosmic irony, his cell phone vibrated. The landlord's name flashed on the screen, the third call this week. Beside it lay the electricity notice with its ominous red lettering, a hospital bill for his mother's medication, and a letter from the bank that remained unopened but whose contents he could guess. "At least think about it," Sophia urged, placing her business card on the workbench. The embossed lettering caught the light. Sophia Monroe, Chief Executive Officer. As she walked away, Liam stood in the doorway of his crumbling kingdom, caught between pride and pragmatism, between the comfort of familiar struggles and the uncertainty of new beginnings. His fingers traced the edges of the card as evening shadows lengthened across the floor, each passing moment whispering that sometimes survival requires leaving parts of yourself behind, even when those parts feel like home. The wrought iron gates of the Monroe estate parted like curtains, revealing a stage too grand for Liam's humble story. His weathered pickup truck, loyal companion through years of struggle, rumbled hesitantly along the immaculate driveway where manicured gardens and marble fountains stood as silent witnesses to wealth beyond imagination. Each turn of the wheels carried him further from everything familiar, deeper into a world where even the air seemed filtered of hardship. The garage, if such a modest word could describe the cathedral of automotive splendor before him, stretched beneath vaulted ceilings and pristine lighting. Ferraris gleamed like liquid fire beside vintage Aston Martins, whose elegant curves spoke of bygone eras. Porsches, Lamborghinis, and Bugattis stood in formation like mechanical royalty awaiting a craftsman's touch. This wasn't a garage. It was a museum where mechanical hearts still beat. "Our newest addition," announced Sophia to the small gathering of impeccably dressed individuals whose scrutinizing gazes made Liam acutely aware of his faded jeans and simple button-down shirt. Their polished smiles never quite reached their eyes as they assessed him with the cold calculation of those who measure worth by pedigree rather than passion. "Darling, couldn't you find someone more suitable?" whispered one woman to Sophia, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she gestured vaguely toward Liam. "Someone from Barrett's firm, perhaps?" "A mechanic from where exactly?" asked another man, his tone suggesting he'd just discovered something unpleasant on the sole of his Italian leather shoes. Beneath their words flowed an undercurrent of judgment, the unspoken belief that someone like Liam belonged beneath cars, not among those who owned them. Yet when Sophia guided him to a 1967 Shelby GT500 with an engine that refused to sing, something shifted. Liam's hands moved with reverent precision across polished metal, his focus narrowing until the whispers and judgments faded to distant echoes. In that moment, it was just him and the machine, two souls speaking a language of mechanical poetry that transcended social boundaries. By sunset, the Shelby's engine purred with renewed life, its perfect note echoing through the cavernous space. As Liam closed the hood, he caught Sophia watching him, respect in her eyes where others had shown only doubt. In that silent exchange lay understanding. In a world obsessed with appearances, true mastery speaks for itself, and sometimes the most authentic beauty emerges from the most calloused hands. Midnight at the Monroe estate carried a different kind of magic. A stillness where pretense surrendered to authenticity. The main house stood dark and dormant, while the garage remained illuminated by a single workbench lamp, its gentle glow creating a sanctuary where two souls from different worlds found unexpected common ground. Sophia sat perched on a wooden stool, her designer heels abandoned beneath her, bare feet swinging gently as she watched Liam's hands bring order to chaos. Beneath the hood of a stubborn 1964 Corvette Stingray, her silk blouse had long since been traded for a simple t-shirt, her perfect updo now a casual cascade of waves, as if the night had given her permission to shed layers of expectation along with formality. "You know what's strange?" she said, voice soft against the backdrop of classical music drifting from an old radio. "I own 27 cars worth more than most people's homes, but I can't remember the last time I drove just for the joy of it." Liam glanced up, a smudge of grease on his cheek like a painter's errant brushstroke. "That might be the saddest thing I've ever heard," he replied, his smile gentle with understanding rather than judgment. They laughed, an unexpected melody of connection, before silence settled between them, comfortable as an old leather jacket. "Everyone sees the mansion, the cars, the company," Sophia continued, her fingers tracing patterns on the cold metal surface beside her. "Nobody sees the girl who still doesn't know if people like her or just what she represents. Wealth buys a lot of things, Liam, but authenticity isn't one of them." The confession hung in the air, vulnerable and rare as a shooting star. "I had a dream once," Liam said finally, closing the Corvette's hood with reverent care. "Carter Classics, restoration, for cars that deserve a second chance, not just fixing what's broken, but honoring the craftsmanship that created it." His eyes carried the distant look of someone seeing beyond present limitations to possibilities just beyond reach. Had the business plan drawn up 3 times. Banks turned me down every time. No collateral, no connections, no chance. He shrugged, the gesture carrying the weight of dreams deferred but not abandoned. Life keeps offering detours instead of destinations. as moonlight filtered through high windows, casting geometric shadows across vintage chrome and polished paint. Something shifted between them. Understanding deeper than words, connection stronger than circumstance. In that moment, they weren't defined by bank accounts or backgrounds, but by shared recognition of life's most universal truth, that sometimes the wealthiest hearts are the ones still searching for something money cannot purchase, and the richest dreams are those that persist despite every reason to surrender. Crystal chandeliers suspended like frozen constellations cast prismatic light across the Monroe Foundation's annual charity gala. The grand ballroom, a symphony of marble, gold, and impossible elegance, hummed with the gentle percussion of champagne flutes and practiced laughter. In this rarefied atmosphere of old money and older names, Liam stood like a solitary oak among manicured topiaries, his rented tuxedo failing to disguise the authenticity that set him apart. He spotted her across the room, Sophia, transformed yet somehow more herself than ever. Her emerald gown cascaded like liquid starlight around her slender frame. But it was the quiet dignity in her eyes that truly captured him. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her smile never quite reaching her eyes as she accepted compliments and deflected flattery with equal skill. Their gazes met across the sea of wealth and privilege, a lighthouse recognizing another in the fog of superficiality. When the orchestra began a waltz that seemed to slow time itself, Liam found himself crossing the invisible boundary separating their worlds. "May I?" he asked, extending his hand with the courage of someone who had nothing to lose but his heart. Her fingers met his, warm, certain, alive, and suddenly they were moving together, floating above judgment and circumstance. Each step, each turn became a conversation without words, a shared secret whispered through the language of movement and trust. "Everyone's watching," she murmured, her voice carrying neither embarrassment nor concern, merely observation. "Let them," he replied simply. "For once they're seeing something real." The music enveloped them in its tender embrace as they moved as one across the gleaming floor. Something unspoken yet undeniable flowed between them. Possibility, perhaps, or recognition of souls familiar to each other despite having only just met. Then came the shattering of glass, literal and metaphorical, as Prescott Wellington III, venture capitalist and self-appointed guardian of social hierarchies, stumbled against them, his champagne cascading down Liam's jacket. "Oh dear," Wellington drawled, loud enough for neighboring conversations to halt. "I believe the help has wandered onto the dance floor. Shouldn't you be parking cars or fixing toilets, my good man?" The silence that followed was deafening, a collective held breath as worlds collided with the force of galaxies meeting in cosmic violence. Liam stood frozen, dignity his only shield against humiliation's bitter sting. In Sophia's eyes flashed something dangerous, anger perhaps, or determination. But beneath it all lay the painful truth neither could deny. In this gilded world of carefully maintained barriers, even dancing hearts must eventually remember their assigned places. Dawn painted the Monroe estate in watercolor hues of amber and gold, nature's beauty a stark contrast to the storm raging within its walls. In the cavernous garage that had become his sanctuary, Liam moved with deliberate purpose, calloused hands, gathering the few belongings that had migrated from his old life. A worn leather toolkit passed down through generations, photographs of simpler times, dreams that no longer seemed to fit. The click of heels against polished concrete announced her arrival before he saw her. Sophia stood framed in the doorway, still elegant despite the sleepless night etched in the shadows beneath her eyes. Something unspoken hung between them. A bridge half built, now crumbling before completion. "You don't have to leave," she said, her voice carrying the gentle authority that had built empires, yet now struggled to reach across the chasm between them. Liam's laugh held no joy, only the bitter recognition of a truth he should have acknowledged sooner. "Last night made it perfectly clear that I do." His hand stilled on a wrench, the first tool he'd ever purchased with his own money. "I was a fool to think I could exist between worlds. What happened last night was reality," he interrupted, finally turning to face her. "Your reality, Sophia. A world where people like me are invisible until we step out of line, where worth is measured by bank accounts and bloodlines instead of character." The morning light caught the determination in his eyes. A man who had bent but refused to break. "I fix engines, not broken social systems." Sophia stepped forward, then hesitated, caught in the gravity of conflicting orbits. The public figure expected to maintain order versus the woman who had shared midnight confessions and unexpected laughter. "Liam, please, we both know this was temporary," he said, softer now, vulnerability bleeding through resolve. "You live in mansions and boardrooms. I belong in garages with grease under my fingernails. Some gaps can't be bridged, no matter how much we might wish otherwise." The silence that followed carried the weight of unspoken feelings, of hands that had accidentally touched while passing tools, of conversations that had wandered far beyond cars into dreams and fears and quiet hopes, of a dance that had meant everything and nothing. As Liam loaded the last of his belongings into his weathered pickup truck, Sophia remained motionless, trapped between worlds of her own, the empire she'd inherited and the authentic connection she'd discovered. When the engine rumbled to life, something inside her screamed to stop him, to choose the uncertain path over the prescribed one. But she remained silent, watching as the distance between them grew with each turn of wheels on gravel. Two souls, retreating to their separate worlds, carrying pieces of each other they hadn't known they'd exchanged. Chapter 9, Wilson's auto shop stood like a faithful old dog waiting for its master's return, weathered, worn, but steadfast in its loyalty. Liam moved through the familiar space with mechanical motions, his body present but his spirit still lingering somewhere between worlds. The tools that once felt like extensions of his hands now seemed foreign, clumsy in his grip as memories of precision equipment and pristine workspaces haunted his movements. Rain tapped a melancholy rhythm against the leaking roof, each drop finding its way through compromised ceiling tiles to form puddles on the concrete floor. Nature's persistent reminder of all he couldn't fix. The stack of bills had multiplied during his absence, their red stamps more urgent, their threats more imminent. The phone rang with the hollow persistence of creditors whose patience had worn thinner than the treads on his customers' tires. "Another week," he promised into the receiver, the words tasting like copper pennies on his tongue. "I just need another week." How many times had he uttered that same desperate prayer to the gods of financial mercy? Across town, in a penthouse, sweet that touched the clouds, Sophia Monroe stood before floor-to-ceiling windows, surrounded by everything money could buy and haunted by all it couldn't. The cityscape glittered below her like a jewelry box of false promises, beautiful, valuable, and ultimately empty of meaning. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass. Perfect makeup, tailored designer dress, not a strand of hair out of place. The flawless facade of success that had become both armor and prison. Behind her, voices droned on about quarterly projections and market strategies. Words that once energized her now falling flat against her consciousness like stones, dropped in stagnant water. "Miss Monroe, your thoughts on the proposal?" asked a voice expectant with deference. The question hung unanswered as revelation washed over her with the force of a tidal wave. For weeks, she had moved through life like a ghost in her own story, attending meetings, making decisions, playing the role expected of her while feeling increasingly hollow. What haunted her wasn't the memory of a man who didn't belong in her world, but the realization that perhaps she no longer belonged in it either. In the reflection of polished glass, something shifted behind her eyes. Determination replacing resignation, clarity cutting through confusion. She turned to face the room of executives who had paused their discussion, waiting for wisdom from the woman whose name adorned the building. "Meeting adjourned," she announced, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had finally recognized the difference between what she owned and what she valued, and was no longer willing to sacrifice one for the other. As bewildered associates gathered their materials, Sophia reached for her phone, purpose guiding her fingers as she made a call that would either bridge worlds or burn bridges completely. Some risks were worth taking, especially when the greatest risk of all was living with the regret of paths not taken and truths left unspoken. The muted bell above Wilson's auto shop door chimed like a memory stirring to life. Liam glanced up from beneath the hood of Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick, his hands stained with the honest work that had always defined him. The silhouette in the doorway, backlit by golden afternoon sunlight, seemed at first like an apparition conjured from his restless dreams. But apparitions didn't wear Italian leather shoes that clicked against concrete floors with purposeful determination. They didn't carry the subtle scent of jasmine and confidence that now filled his humble workspace. And they certainly didn't look at him with eyes that held both trepidation and resolve in equal measure. Sophia. He breathed her name like a prayer, never meant to be answered. She stood before him, the polished elegance of her tailored blazer and silk blouse incongruous against the backdrop of scattered tools and oil stains. Yet somehow she looked more at home here than she ever had beneath crystal chandeliers. "I've been thinking about dreams," she said without preamble, her voice steady despite the rapid flutter of her pulse visible at her throat. "About people who see potential where others see only rust and wear." From her designer bag, she withdrew a folder embossed with the Monroe Industries logo. "Carter Classics Restoration. Your vision, your expertise, my investment." The folder landed on his workbench with the weight of worlds colliding. Liam stared at it, then at her, wariness hardening his features like metal tempering in flame. "I don't need charity," he said. the words carrying the bitter edge of pride wounded once too often. "This isn't charity," Sophia countered, stepping closer until the scent of motor oil and designer perfume mingled in the space between them. "It's business. The best kind, where passion meets opportunity." Her eyes held his, unflinching. "I've sat through 1,000 pitches from men with MBAs and connections. None of them understand cars or authenticity the way you do." Liam's laugh held no humor, only the protective cynicism of someone who'd learned that fairy tales come with fine print. "Right. The billionaire CEO just happens to think investing in a small-town mechanic with no collateral is good business." "Yes," she answered simply. "Because some investments aren't measured in quarterly returns. Some are measured in the light that returns to someone's eyes when they're doing what they were born to do." The silence between them vibrated with unspoken truths, of worlds that shouldn't overlap yet somehow had, of feelings that defied logical explanation, of two people standing at the crossroads of practicality and possibility. Liam's hand hovered over the folder, caught between reaching for a dream and protecting a heart that couldn't survive being broken twice by the same impossible hope. The crisp autumn breeze carried the scent of possibility as Sophia's silver Bentley glided to a stop outside Wilson's auto shop 1 week later. The morning sun kissed the vehicle's immaculate curves, highlighting every perfect detail of automotive excellence, a stark contrast to the humility of its surroundings. But it wasn't the car that commanded attention. It was the determined set of Sophia's shoulders as she emerged, clutching a leather portfolio that held the weight of futures yet to be written. Liam looked up from sorting through a box of salvaged parts, each piece a small victory against waste, each restoration a testament to his belief that broken things deserved second chances. The wariness in his eyes hadn't fully faded since her last visit, like a man who'd learned to question rainbows after too many storms. "You're persistent," he observed, wiping his hands on a shop rag that had seen better days. "I'll give you that." Sophia's smile held no artifice as she placed the portfolio on his workbench. "Some things are worth being persistent for." She opened it with deliberate care, revealing not just papers, but a cashier's check with numbers that made Liam's breath catch in his throat. "What is this?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "The 1968 Ferrari 365 GTC, she said, her fingers tracing the edge of a photograph showing a gleaming red masterpiece of Italian engineering. "My grandfather's favorite. I sold it yesterday to a collector in Switzerland." Liam's eyes widened in disbelief. "You sold? But that car is irreplaceable, worth exactly what you see on that check," she finished for him. "Enough to rebuild this place from the ground up. New equipment, proper ventilation, a lift that doesn't groan in protest with each use." The silence between them vibrated with unspoken emotion as Liam struggled to comprehend what lay before him. Not just money, but sacrifice. The kind that couldn't be measured in dollars or cents, but in the willingness to part with something precious for something believed in even more deeply. "This isn't pity or charity," Sophia continued, her voice carrying the gentle authority that had built empires, yet now served a more personal mission. "This is me betting on the man who saw the soul in machines others had written off as junk. The man who fixed my car but showed me something far more valuable, that authenticity doesn't diminish with wear. it deepens. Outside the Bentley court, the light one final time before the tow truck she'd arranged began to load it. "That one's being sold next," she added, following his gaze. "I don't need status symbols anymore. I need partners who understand that legacy isn't what you own, it's what you build." In that moment, everything shifted. Perception, possibility, and the invisible walls that had kept their worlds apart. What stood before Liam wasn't a wealthy heiress playing at generosity, but a woman investing her heart along with her fortune, risking everything on the belief that some connections transcend circumstance. The transformation of Wilson's auto shop unfolded like a time-lapse of seasons changing, each day bringing new life to spaces long surrendered to decay. What began with demolition evolved into creation as walls came down and possibilities rose in their place. The symphony of renovation echoed through the small town, hammers keeping rhythm with hope, power tools harmonizing with determination, and beneath it all, the steady duet of two voices sharing visions that grew more intertwined. With each passing day, Liam moved through the emerging space with reverent wonder, his calloused fingers tracing the contours of industrial-grade lifts and diagnostic equipment that once existed only in his most ambitious dreams. Each morning brought the surreal discovery that yesterday's progress wasn't just another fleeting fantasy destined to evaporate with the dawn. The eastern wall should be glass, Sophia suggested one evening, her designer heels long since traded for practical boots that carried the honest dust of creation. So clients can watch the restoration process, see the artistry behind what you do. The business plan spread. Before them were marked with her elegant script alongside his practical notations, two perspectives merging into something greater than either could have envisioned alone. When Carter Classics officially opened its doors 3 months later, the line of vehicles waiting stretched beyond expectation. Vintage Corvettes beside rare European sports cars, beloved family heirlooms next to celebrity-owned collector's items. Sophia's network had responded to her passionate advocacy with enthusiasm that transcended curiosity. "They're not here because of my connections," she explained, observing Liam's momentary doubt as he surveyed the impossible collection of automotive treasures awaiting his touch. "They're here because I showed them your work. Excellence needs no translation. It speaks across all boundaries." The days flowed into weeks, weeks into months. Time measured not in hours, but in shared accomplishments and quiet moments. Coffee, a dawn before the world awakened, shoulders touching as they reviewed restoration plans, laughter echoing beneath the hood of particularly stubborn engines. The lingering glances grew longer, the accidental touches less accidental, the space between them charged with unspoken possibility. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening as they closed the shop, the golden hour casting everything in the amber light of potential. Their hands reached for the same set of keys, fingers brushing with the electricity of inevitability. The moment suspended between heartbeats, question and answer existing simultaneously in the air between them. "This isn't just about cars anymore, is it?" Liam asked, voice gentle with wonder. Sophia's smile held all the certainty that wealth had never provided. "I think it never was." As their lips finally met in the space where worlds had once collided and now merged, the truth became beautifully clear. Sometimes life's most precious restorations aren't of metal and chrome, but of hearts rediscovering their capacity to trust in possibility beyond circumstance. Twilight descended upon the small town of Oak Ridge like a gentle promise, painting the sky in watercolor strokes of lavender and gold. As Carter Classics locked its doors for the evening, Liam took Sophia's hand with newfound confidence, his work-worn fingers intertwining with hers in a physical manifestation of worlds harmoniously merged. "Tonight," he announced, with a playful glint in his eyes that had grown increasingly familiar. No reservations, no chauffeurs, no five-star ratings, just the real Oak Ridge experience. Sophia's laughter, freer now, unburdened by expectation, danced on the evening breeze as she followed him to his restored vintage truck. The vehicle represented their journey, once weathered and overlooked, now polished to reveal its inherent beauty, without sacrificing its authentic character. Main Street welcomed them with the warm glow of string lights, crisscrossing above the modest thoroughfare. Here, wealth wasn't measured in square footage or thread counts, but in the genuine smiles of recognition that greeted them at every turn. The local diner, its neon sign flickering with charming imperfection, offered them not exquisite cuisine, but something far more valuable: community. "Liam Carter, about time you brought your lady friend around," called Marie, the 60-something waitress whose laugh lines told stories of a life richly lived. "The usual booths waiting for you too." The vinyl seats squeaked beneath them as they settled into a corner where generations of local love stories had unfolded beneath the same flickering lights. Sophia, who had dined in restaurants where single meals cost more than most people's monthly rent, found herself enchanted by the simple pleasure of chocolate milkshakes served in frosted glasses and burgers that required both hands and several napkins. The secret's in the griddle, been seasoned since 1963, Liam explained with the reverence of sharing a precious heritage. Later, they strolled along the town's modest river walk, where fireflies performed their luminous ballet above, water that reflected constellations unobscured by city lights. Nearby, a local musician strummed an acoustic guitar, his melodies carrying on the night air like memories finding their way home. "In my world," Sophia confessed, her head resting against Liam's shoulder, "everything is curated, polished, designed to impress. But here, nothing's trying to be anything other than what it is. And somehow, that's more beautiful than all the perfection money can buy." As moonlight silvered the landscape around them, they stopped on the old covered bridge that had witnessed countless whispered promises. Sophia turned to face him, her eyes reflecting starlight and certainty in equal measure. "All my life I've had addresses, mansions, penthouses, vacation estates, but never a home," she whispered, her palm resting against his chest, where his heart beat steady and true. "Until you. Until this. I've never belonged anywhere the way I belong when I'm with you." Their silhouettes merged into one as they embraced, a living testament to the truth that the heart recognizes no boundaries when it finally discovers where it was always meant to dwell. Crystal chandeliers suspended from soaring ceilings cast their radiance across the annual Monroe Industries Gala, a gathering where fortunes were discreetly compared and alliances delicately forged. The ballroom hummed with the practiced symphony of wealth. Champagne flutes clinking, polite laughter rising and falling, the rustle of designer gowns moving across marble floors like whispers of privilege. Sophia stood at the entrance, a vision in midnight blue silk that caught the light with each breath. But it wasn't her gown that drew gasps from the assembled elite. It was the man beside her. Liam Carter, his natural dignity apparent despite his unease in formal attire, stood tall with his hand resting gently at the small of her back, not as an accessory to her world, but as its foundation. Conversations faltered mid-sentence as they moved through the crowd, leaving shocked silence in their wake like a ship cutting through still waters. Prescott Wellington III, the same man who had once humiliated Liam, approached with the predatory smile of someone accustomed to controlling narratives. "Sophia, darling," he drawled, pointedly addressing only her. "How charitable of you to bring your employee to such an exclusive gathering." The room seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for the social dance that would preserve hierarchies while maintaining politeness. Instead, they witnessed revolution. "Prescott," Sophia replied, her voice carrying clearly across the sudden silence. "Allow me to introduce Liam Carter, my partner." Her hand found Liam's, fingers intertwining with deliberate purpose. In every sense of the word, the implications rippled through the crowd like stones dropped in still water, concentric circles of realization, judgment, and recalculation. Eleanor Huntington, socialite and self-appointed guardian of appropriate matches, pressed a hand to her pearl necklace as if to prevent it from fleeing in protest. "But surely, Sophia," she sputtered, "you can't mean to suggest that you and this mechanic are actually—" "The man I love," Sophia finished for her, her smile radiant with certainty that needed no external validation. "The man who taught me that authenticity isn't a luxury. It's the only currency that truly matters." Murmurs swelled around them. Disapproval, fascination, calculation, but they registered only as distant static beneath the truth. Sophia continued to speak. "I've spent my life in boardrooms and ballrooms like this one," she announced, her voice steady with conviction that silenced even the whispers. "And I've never met anyone with more integrity, vision, or genuine worth than the man standing beside me now." Her eyes swept the crowd, challenging every assumption that had governed her world. "I don't care where he comes from. I care about who he is." In that crystalline moment, something shifted, not just between Sophia and Liam, but in the very foundation of the world they inhabited. As she stood proudly beside the man who had crossed boundaries to claim her heart, Sophia Monroe discovered that the greatest power wasn't in maintaining barriers, but in having the courage to tear them down. Golden afternoon light spilled across the windswept coastal highway, painting the world in hues of possibility and promise. The 1967 Mustang Fastback, once abandoned, now meticulously restored, hugged each curve with the confident precision of something that had found its true purpose. Its engine sang a melodious symphony of power and grace, a mechanical heartbeat that seemed to pulse in harmony with the two souls it carried forward. Behind the wheel, Liam's hands rested with casual expertise, his eyes occasionally drifting to the woman beside him. Sophia had traded boardroom attire for simple jeans and a windblown ponytail, her laughter now as unrestricted as the breeze that danced through the open windows. The remains of their roadside picnic, local cheese, fresh bread, and half-empty thermoses of coffee, bounced gently in the back seat with each mile devoured beneath pristine tires. "First restoration we ever did together," Liam reflected, patting the dashboard with affectionate reverence. Nobody thought this old girl would ever run again. Sophia's smile carried the wisdom of someone who had discovered that life's most profound treasures often hide beneath tarnished exteriors. People are too quick to give up on things that just need time and care, she said, her hand finding his on the gear shift. Cars and hearts alike. The coastline unfolded before them like pages of an unwritten story, endless possibilities stretching to a horizon where sea met sky in a seamless embrace. Carter Classics had become something neither could have created alone, a testament to what happens when passion meets opportunity, when different worlds find common ground in shared vision. Where to next? Liam asked, the question carrying weight beyond their immediate journey. Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment radiating from her like warmth from an engine finally running at its optimal temperature. Anywhere, she answered simply, as long as we're driving there together. The road ahead curved into infinity, its destination less important than the journey itself. In the rearview mirror, their past, with all its barriers and misconceptions, grew smaller with each passing moment, while before them stretched the limitless horizon of possibility. As the Mustang crested a hill overlooking the vast expanse of ocean and opportunity, the truth became brilliantly clear. True wealth was never measured in bank accounts or status symbols, but in the courage to recognize value where others saw only limitations. In finding someone who sees not just who you are, but who you could become. In the rare and precious discovery of a heart that feels like home, regardless of which side of the tracks it happened to begin its journey. The Mustang's engine growled with joyful promise as they accelerated toward tomorrow. Two souls from different worlds who had proven that the greatest restoration of all is the one that happens when love sees beyond circumstance to the authentic beauty waiting to be revealed.